This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Governments across the world recalibrate COVID-19 containment measures as cases surpass 3.2 million globally. South Africa starts to lift national lockdown amid worrying surge in COVID-19 cases. And in our continuing special series, we look at the challenges of enforcing physical distancing in African countries. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's begin with the latest figures on COVID-19. Across the world, confirmed cases now total over 3.2 million, with more than 233,000 deaths. The number of cases in the United States has topped 1 million, about a third of the global total, with a death toll of over 63,000. Nearly half of the world's cases are in Europe. Spain has recorded the most infections on the continent with more than 213,000 cases. Italy has recorded a death toll of 27,000, second only to the U.S. The UK has seen over 6,000 new infections in the past 24 hours. It has Europe's second highest death toll. Turkey has seen infections top 120,000. The Chinese mainland has confirmed 12 new cases. 6 are people who returned from abroad. Russia is reporting a record daily spike of nearly 8,000 coronavirus cases a day after Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin tested positive for COVID-19. The first Prime Minister, Andrei Belousov, will stand in for him while he self-isolates. Mishustin was last seen with Putin in person on March the 24th during a meeting about the outbreak at the president's residence. Confirmed cases in Russia have now surpassed 100,000, with over 1,000 deaths. Medical supplies in the country are running low. Dan Ashby reports.
It is a picture of calm, controlled healthcare, filmed by the doctor in charge of Moscow's main coronavirus hospital. But this may be the exception. There are now so many serious cases in Russia that ambulances are queuing for hours to get patients admitted. In one hospital just outside of Moscow, so many medics have been infected that staff have called the Domestic Intelligence Agency, the FSB, to investigate.
The problem was that we didn't have means of protection. In general, the hospital wasn't prepared to receive patients with suspected coronavirus. The logistics weren't considered in advance about how to keep patients away from each other or protect doctors from infection. There wasn't even basic PPE that could protect doctors, at least, from being infected by the sick patients.
While the situation around Moscow is difficult, other regions are likely to be even worse off.
Moscow has been the focus of Russia's fight against COVID-19, but the virus is quickly spreading across the rest of the country, and the fear is that other regions do not have this city's resources.
A poll found that 3/4 of doctors say they don't have enough equipment. Dr. Tatiana Reva in the Volgograd region said she raised concerns about poor gear, but has since been threatened with prosecution.
In the end, they started putting pressure on me, a lot of it. Now it's all escalated, reached the investigative committee. My colleagues and I are being questioned by investigators. I feel like all my attempts to bring change won't go anywhere. I'm very upset by all of this. I see what they're getting at, to get me fired.
The local health department involved says it does have enough stock. President Putin says Russia is making millions more masks and thousands more ventilators, but more still will be needed. He says Russia's efforts, though, are paying off.
We managed to slow down the spread of the epidemic. This is the result of our joint work, the responsibility of millions of citizens of the country. The daily number of new cases of the disease has stabilized.
President Putin acknowledges the situation is dire and the healthcare system is in emergency mode. And for many, the wait to get through these coming weeks will be long indeed. Dan Ashby, CGTN, Moscow.
And let's turn to South Africa now, where the country has begun to gradually ease its coronavirus lockdown. The Southern African nation has been on strict national lockdown since March. The country has reported over 5,600 infections and 103 deaths. The easing of the lockdown will allow for some industries to reopen. These include winter clothing, textile and packaging, and manufacturing. Restaurants will also open, but only for deliveries. The controversial ban on the sale of cigarettes and alcohol will remain in effect. Physical distancing and wearing masks in public and at workplaces will be mandatory. The lockdown has plunged South Africa's struggling economy deeper into turmoil. The economy is expected to contract by 5.8% this year. Job losses are projected between 3 and 7 million due to productivity lost. And CGTN's Angela Coppola joins us now live from Johannesburg. Angela Coppola, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. Angela, the national lockdown in South Africa is being eased this Friday. What has been the impact so far of the lifting of restrictions, Angela?
Well, the most obvious change this morning started at around 6 o'clock. First of all, we have to all wear masks in public now regardless, and there's a fine or even imprisonment if you're not doing that. The streets were flooded with runners, joggers, walkers, families out on the streets taking their dogs for a walk. So that was the most obvious change from midnight up until today, or until the working hours today. Those retail shops that you mentioned will be opening. There's some 1.5 million workers that are going to be going back to work, but only once the workplaces have been sanitized. And here in Parkhurst, which has a lot of restaurants on it, people are already in the shops, scrubbing floors, spraying down, sanitizing the areas. So that's the big change that we've seen since the first lockdown at level 5. The retail sector is starting to reawaken, so we're seeing that happen right now. And basically what's happening at the moment is people are getting ready to go back to work. So we have that reawakening that is happening at the moment. Richard?
All right, Angela, from all indications, things do seem positive. From your perspective, though, what should we expect going forward? And how much of a boost to the economy will the lifting of restrictions translate to, Angela?
Well, Richard, the government has tried to restart or indicate that we need to start restarting some of the bigger industry sectors. For example, the mining sector has been allowed to ramp up to 50% production. So there's 50% production that's going to be happening there. As you mentioned, there's some 3 million jobs that are probably going to get lost, and that's a big issue. There is lost revenue from lack of alcohol sales and lack of cigarette sales. That's going to run into millions of dollars and impact the SARS or the tax revenue collectors to the tune of at least 5, maybe if not $15 million per month. So that's a huge amount of money that's being lost. And of course, the taxes on salaries is also going to be down because people are being retrenched. The companies that can't keep their doors open, regardless of the benefits or the structures that have been put in place to try and resolve some of those issues there. So we're waiting to see how that's going to play out at the moment, Richard.
All right, with all of that being said, Angelo, the last couple of days have seen a marked spike in COVID-19 cases in South Africa. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, look, we know that when it comes to scanning and testing, the data that's being released now is at least 2 weeks old. So we're into week 1 or day 1 of this new level 4 testing level. So it's 2-week-old data, which it wasn't surprising to any of the health specialists that we've been chatting to. They expected a spike because generally we've increased the amount of scanning that we're doing and also increased the number of tests that are being done. In fact, we had some 8,000 tests done in one day about 2 days ago, which is a huge jump from what it was 2 weeks ago. So it has a lot to do with the data and the statistics and the fact that there's more testing being done. We have seen some spikes in hospitals and some prisons in the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape, for example. We know that the Western Cape now is the epicenter. It's overtaken Gauteng by a significant number. Third place province in terms of infections is KwaZulu-Natal, which is at the coast. The public sector hospitals do appear to be back on track, though. But so we don't know exactly where the hotspots are locally because that data is not being released to the public. But we do know that the authorities are moving as quickly as they can to make sure that they tackle those cases. Also, the number of people that have been hospitalized is still pretty static at the moment, so there's no anxiety around what's happening in terms of people being hospitalized. Again, the nature of the deaths that have been reported all point to older people with underlying health problems. So at the moment, the health authorities seem to be on top of this. Of course, we'll see in the coming days and weeks whether that trend is getting flattened or if it's continuing to increase as the amount of tests increase. Richard?
Angela Coppola, thank you so much for that update and report. Excellent reporting. Well, moving on, China and South Africa have long maintained close ties, especially during the coronavirus pandemic. The strength of this relationship was recently demonstrated when one South African business approached the Chinese government for help with scarce personal protective equipment and other medical supplies. CGTN's Angela Coppola picks up that story.
As more and more countries became infected, so the demand for personal protective equipment began to outstrip supply.
3 weeks ago, the chairman of NASPAS, Mr. Kusbeker, wrote to me, to request our assistance to facilitate the medical supplies from China to South Africa. And for that, I'm more than happy to do that, because South Africa and China, we are strategic partners, and we have been helping each other all the time.
NASPAS is one of many South African businesses that heeded the call from President Ramaphosa, ensuring that supply meets the specific needs of the country.
We've got a team that's focused on this, and they liaise with the Department of Health continuously. And so they were the ones who told us what we must buy specifically and where it must go. So the initial PPE that came in has gone into various hospitals around the country, all taken through by Take a Lot. And so with this PPE that's come in now of 6 million masks, those are now going through to the various hospitals around the country where they have been allocated to by the Department of Health.
The country's president has been leading from the front and making time to thank everyone who's rolled up their sleeves and got involved.
We're truly grateful that we have corporations like NASPAS and many others who have decided that they are going to lend a hand and assist our whole effort of fighting COVID-19. But we are also grateful to China for continuing to supply these medical supplies that we so need.
It's all about teamwork. It's about the private sector getting involved to fill up those gaps that are left by the public sector, and it's about fighting that virus. We all pull together, we can get this job done. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his capacity as the chairperson of the African Union, held a virtual meeting with the chairpersons of the AU regional economic communities. The meeting provided the chairs with an update on the steps undertaken by the AU Bureau to combat the coronavirus. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
The AU Chair Cyril Ramaphosa first commended the continent's leaders for their commitment in fighting COVID-19, but warned that on the African continent, the peak of infections will only hit later.
While the numbers of infections in Africa at this time is lower than elsewhere in the world, we expect that the peak of infections in Africa will definitely come later. And this is what the science is telling us. And this will be with devastating consequences.
The AU Chair says this therefore calls for extraordinary measures to be implemented on this continent.
At this time, it is also vital that we intensify efforts to end all forms of violence, destabilization, and terrorism on our continent. If we are to be successful in overcoming the coronavirus pandemic, we need to work even harder to silence the guns and to ensure that they remain silent.
The AU has also undertaken various measures to contain the spread of the virus and to mitigate the economic fallout that will be caused by the virus.
Among other things, your bureau agreed to establish the AU COVID-19 Response Fund, a drive to raise additional funds for the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and intensify the lobbying from the international community for a comprehensive, robust economic stimulus package for Africa. To date, we have managed to raise $25 million for the response fund and an additional $36.5 million for the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Ramaphosa also announced that the AU regional economic communities have held meetings with various stakeholders to discuss robust economic stimulus packages to assist the continent. Ramaphosa acknowledged the pressing need for ventilators, health workers, and other medical supplies for the continent. He further appealed to world leaders to assist Africa in this regard. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Still in South Africa, a brewery in Cape Town has been converted into a temporary soup kitchen. The COVID-19 pandemic is exacerbating issues of poverty and hunger as a nationwide lockdown continues into its 6th week.
The sale of alcohol is strictly prohibited during South Africa's national lockdown. The Woodstock Brewery was forced to close its restaurant and stop production of its beloved beer. But the brewery team decided to open their hearts and turn their brew house into a soup kitchen.
In a normal process, we make sugar water here, barley sugar water, add hops to it, and then over a period of about 4 weeks, it ferments and we've got beer. Now what we've decided to do is use our big boiling vessels that we have, that have stirring rakes at the bottom. We are using those to cook soup, vegetable soup that we prepare here, and that is going to be used across the whole of the Cape area.
They've joined forces with a number of different NGOs, such as the District 6 Working Committee and a small army of volunteers who all share the same goal: to help put a lid on the potential disaster of a surge in the COVID-19 infection rate coupled with devastating hunger.
In the Western Cape, we have a lot of poverty, we have a lot of inequality, and right now we have the Cape Flats and in the informal settlements, township areas that are basically a powder keg right now, because we have rising hunger, a rising malnutrition, COVID infection rate going up, seeing more and more infections every day, and we really need to protect people's immune systems through good nutrition.
We've worked with the City of Cape Town and with all of the communities to ensure that distribution takes place. Now what we need to do is just make sure that we can keep funding it and keep feeding people.
The Woodstock Brewery team and their volunteers say they are determined to keep on producing soup on tap for as many hungry people as possible throughout the COVID-19 crisis and beyond. Renate Alcom, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Chinese and Zambian health experts have held an online video conference to share experiences on how to effectively prevent and control the coronavirus. Zambia has so far reported over 100 cases and 3 deaths. More than a dozen frontline medical workers have been infected with COVID-19. This prompted the e-conference to also touch on the health and safety of those directly involved in the treatment and prevention. Zambia is expected to receive about $145 million from multilateral lenders to help fight the coronavirus. The country is dealing with the economic fallout from the global pandemic and is taking action to support businesses. Niger has received a boost in medical supplies from China. This is expected to aid the country as it continues to battle with COVID-19. The West African country has recorded more than 700 confirmed cases of the coronavirus. It's also reported more than 400 recoveries and 32 deaths so far.
There is a desperate need for medical aid in African countries like Niger. Many question the ability of health systems to cope if cases rise rapidly. And when countries like China step in to try fill this gap, it's a relief for many governments.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are receiving 3 donations of consumables and medical equipment donated by China, the Jack Ma Foundation, and the Chinese Embassy in Niger. These various gestures illustrate the great interest that China takes in the well-being of the people of Niger. Moreover, I remain convinced that the combined efforts of the state and its friends like China will contribute significantly to improving the health of our fellow citizens. Niger highly appreciates these efforts.
Since the start of the pandemic, China has been ramping up its international assistance to help contain the virus. It has been sharing experiences and providing medical supplies.
This donation package is part of the Chinese government's first emergency assistance to African countries, and a larger package of the assistance is on the way. The epidemic of unprecedented magnitude will have a very profound impact on our humanity. As they say often, it's in misfortune that friends are known. The Chinese people will never forget the precious support and the acts of solidarity that the people of Africa in general and the people of Niger in particular have shown to China at the most difficult time it experienced earlier this year in the fight against the coronavirus. Whether it is COVID-19 or H1N1 flu of 2009 or AIDS or Ebola, these diseases teach us that we human beings are part of the big family and that we live in the same global village. Our destiny is closely intertwined.
The donation from China to Niger includes respirators, soaps, thermometers, nucleic acid test kits, surgical masks, and thousands of protective gear. Chinese companies operating in Niger have also donated protective supplies. Chamhono, CGTN.
Our coverage continues on Africa Live. Here's a look at what's ahead. In our continuing special series, we look at the challenges of enforcing physical distancing measures in African countries, and how Tunisian caregivers are coping with autism in children amid the coronavirus pandemic.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN. Welcome back. Veteran South African anti-apartheid activist Dennis Goldberg has died at the age of 87. Goldberg was a member of the ANC military wing and was convicted alongside Nelson Mandela. He was convicted of armed resistance to white minority rule and sentenced to 4 life terms in 1964. He spent 22 years in jail. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has been paying tribute to the veteran.
We had the very sad news of the death of Dennis Goldberg, a great stalwart of our movement, and a person who contributed a great deal to our freedom, who worked with Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and many other stalwarts of our movement. We are saddened to have lost him. He was a true patriot, a person who sacrificed everything and his life for the freedom of our people. We will be flying the flags of our country at half-mast in recognition of him, and also to give gratitude for the contribution that he has made. The entire movement, the African National Congress, is saddened by his departure.
Ghana's parliament has resumed after nearly a month's break since the country went on lockdown to contain the spread of COVID-19. As the country relaxes its lockdown restrictions, legislators will consider measures to complement the government's fight against the virus. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rofai reports from Accra.
As Ghana's legislators return to parliament, they are taking precautions to prevent further spread of COVID-19. Now, wearing face masks is compulsory for all legislators and staff, careful to take sanitary precautions as they take their seats. The first order of business, passing legislation related to COVID-19.
Government submitted proposals to us. This COVID-19 Trust Fund bill that we passed. We also passed the imposition of restrictions bill, right? These are two major laws that we have passed to enable government to deal with the matter before us.
The COVID-19 Trust Fund bill passed by Parliament gives legal backing for the establishment of a fund towards the government's fight against the virus, while the restriction bill allows the president to impose restrictions on the movement of people during emergencies. Parliament is also working towards waiving income taxes of frontline health workers for the next 3 months, as well as taxes on donations of stocks and equipment for the fight against COVID-19. As Ghana finds its way to ease out of lockdown, legislators say it's important to get the details right.
I thought that we could observe the social distancing better, because I don't see it being observed very well in the house. And I feel that if we come to the house, we go straight to the business of the day. What is important, you deal with it, and we are up and we are gone. Not to be bringing any other things that are not directly linked to COVID-19 at this hour.
Ghana's infections of COVID-19 continue to increase after easing the lockdown. Lawmakers want the health minister to be invited to brief the House on the country's progress in tackling the coronavirus pandemic. Discussions on Ghana's fight against the COVID-19 will continue to be of priority for lawmakers from now. But with the country's elections set for December hanging in the balance due to the pandemic, lawmakers are also looking to invite the Electoral Commission to update the House on its plan. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And South Sudan's government says it's engaged in consultations to speed up the formation of its new parliament. The IGAD deadline for the dissolution of the current parliament expired at the end of April. The country's executive branch was constituted in February, but the National Assembly is not yet constituted due to disagreements over the allocation of constituencies. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
The disagreement among the 5 parties in South Sudan's government is on who should run which state. If that is resolved, then each party would know from which part of the country its members of parliament would come. The East African regional body, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, which mediated the 2018 peace deal, is urging the parties to complete the formation of the new parliament by May 10th. The current parliament comprises 400 members, all from President Salva Kiir's party. The peace deal, however, dictates that it be dissolved and reconstituted with 550 members from all the 5 parties in the current government.
The first priority is, of course, the dissolution of the Transitional National Legislative Assembly and the reconstitution of the National Assembly within 10 days.
South Sudan's Foreign Affairs Ministry says the parties to the peace deal are closer to completing the formation of the new Transitional National Legislative Assembly.
The formation of the TNLA and all that will come because also our leader is consulting with within the leadership, within the presidency, as well as the co-guarantors. And soon we are very confident that the issue of the states will be resolved, as well as the TNLA.
Civil societies in South Sudan are warning that the vacuum created by the delay in constituting the parliament and appointment of state governors could provide room for intercommunal violence. one of the would-be functions of the Transitional National Legislative Assembly would be to ensure that the current peace deal is fully implemented. However, the delay in formation of the government is creating uncertainty here. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, measures taken by African governments to control the spread of COVID-19 have had far-reaching socio-economic impacts. CGTN is airing a series of stories on how the outbreak has affected different segments of society. Today, we're focusing on how countries on the continent are implementing physical distancing measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus. In most of Africa, physical distancing is as strange as it sounds. Communities across the continent derive joy and satisfaction in the sense of closeness in good times and bad. The coronavirus pandemic has disrupted life, especially among populations living in informal settlements. CGTN's Leon Sienga visited Kamocha in the Ugandan capital, Kampala, for a first-hand account of how slum dwellers are coping.
Kamocha, a densely packed slum in Uganda's capital of Kampala. It is home to over 15,000 people, including Zauja Namukumbi. Amid the COVID-19 crisis, Zauja says she is aware of the advice on how to avoid contracting the coronavirus.
We have been told to wash our hands, give ourselves some distance, 4 meters from person to avoid the disease.
But there is little she can do about maintaining social distancing advice. The small spaces shared here, Zauja cannot avoid the close contacts.
I live in a small room. There is no way I can make the 4 meters they have told us. We are always near each other.
And she is not alone. With no work now, many people are instead gathering together in this tightly packed community. Social distancing here may be difficult to achieve, but there are other ways the community is teaming up to raise awareness about the crisis. The physical environment of the slum makes for easy transmission of the disease, and this slum organization, Ghetto Lab, is enforcing mandatory hand washing. They say it is easy to get people on the move.
They are moving like 5-9 members. Don't know that one, don't know this one. So it is a big problem, but what we have to do, we have to keep on sensitizing so that we can fight against this COVID-19.
Another group is making non-contact hand-washing containers. They hope to put them at various points in this area.
If everyone can wash their hands, if everyone can have the masks, if we can have stations with hand wash, you know, if we can provide the food, the sack gardens to the lamb at Lisa Care, you know, then we can be safe in the ghetto.
Uganda has realized some progress in the fight against the coronavirus with 4 recoveries from 54 cases. The community here is not about to throw caution to the wind. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Kenya, like many other countries across the globe, has limited social gatherings and asked the public to stay home in a bid to curb the spread of COVID-19. We asked families to share videos of how they are spending their days. Here's a glimpse of what life in Kenyan homes look like in the time of COVID-19.
Kenya hasn't imposed a full lockdown in its fight against COVID-19. But many workplaces have closed down to enable members of the public to stay home and stay safe. And as they stay home, so Kenyans have discovered new skills, interests, and creative ways of keeping busy. In this home, school lessons start early, but now they are online. In a move to curb the spread of COVID-19, the government closed all institutions of learning and sent learners home. Now students have the option of learning online through the radio or alone from their textbooks. In another part of the city, the morning's work is done and now the fun begins. A jigsaw puzzle keeps these children's hands and minds busy for a few hours. Some have taken to cooking dishes from new recipes. After the government banned social gatherings in this estate on the outskirts of Nairobi, children attended Sunday school from the safety of their balconies. For athletes, the year's events may have been postponed or even cancelled, but the training continues. Kenya's rugby team, for example, is keen to find the best routine to stay in shape.
Our preparation at home has been different. We have tried to learn different kind of training techniques to be able to keep our fitness, just get our blood pumping and our fitness level to be at a certain level. It's not been easy to staying at home because being a sportsman, you're used to moving and using the facilities. Most of them have been closed down. So it has taken us time to just adjust to the environment and to be able to get the best of what we can do.
But it's not all rest, fun and games. Thousands of Kenyans across the country are facing job losses and declining incomes. For those depending on daily wages, work continues, albeit with safety measures in place.
I depend on my motorcycle for my daily meal. So if you tell people like me to stay at home, what will I eat?
As the world races to halt the spread of the virus, in Kenya as in other parts of the country, families are simply trying to stay afloat, to survive the virus so that one day they can thrive again. Wilkis Anyabo, CGTN.
Medical workers across Africa are worried that they may infect others with COVID-19. This is because of shortages in personal protective equipment. However, an initiative in Senegal has mobilized 3D printers to make face shields.
Impression 3D. Donc on lance l'impression, dans 30 minutes après on aura la visière qui est prête. Donc après il suffit d'acheter du papier transparent qu'on trouve facilement dans les librairies. Donc on met des trous avec le perforateur et après on assemble des élastiques et on le met sur les crochets du visière. Et après on met le transparent tout autour et voilà, et la visière elle est prête.
Cette visière, ça va permettre à leurs agents de se protéger s'ils viennent au niveau du malade, et de se protéger et de ne pas devenir vecteur. Parce que le plus dangereux serait que les agents sanitaires du Sénégal deviennent vecteurs eux-mêmes de la maladie.
And we're not done just yet. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more stories in business. Here's a look at what's ahead. How a popular pastry chain in Egypt is managing to stay afloat despite the coronavirus pandemic.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. The coronavirus pandemic has resulted in many Egyptian businesses cutting costs. But two young entrepreneurs with a chain of pastry shops are finding new ways to stay afloat while preserving salaries and jobs. This despite having to shut all their branches amid the lockdown. Here is CGTN's Adel Al-Mahroui with more.
This Egyptian brand is known for its mouth-watering desserts. In recent years, it's been among the fastest growing chains industry until COVID-19 has hit.
2019 ended fantastically, and we had started the year as well very solid, great. We had fantastic projections. Beginning of March, thankfully, we still had the growth. We have a regular around 37% growth. We saw that growth decline in March to 9%. And then suddenly people started to be aware in Egypt of the whole coronavirus, that our sales went down, like from at least the growth of 8%, it went down 70%. And then we had for the security of our employees, we closed down.
This chain began with one cupcake shop in 2010. Today, Adel and his sister manage 28 outlets.
This branch is the latest addition to the Nola family. It had only operated for a few days, and then a poster on its door said they had closed until further notice. The government had shut shops on weekends and imposed a night curfew. But the owners decided to keep all the jobs and salaries for their staff, despite the vague future the pandemic provided.
At Nola, we were partners, we support each other, we're a family, all of us, and we're in this together. So at least, it's something out of all of our hands, and from our side, we're trying to be. We want to support our employees as much as we can.
With 350 employees working for them, it's been a huge financial commitment for the young entrepreneurs. Luckily for them, the government has lifted many of its COVID-19 commercial restrictions right before the month of Ramadan began.
Ramadan is the most important month for our business. Basically, it's an additional quarter to our sales. We basically work our year around how we're going to maximize our sales, how we're going to enhance operations, how we're going to develop new products.
To cope with the lockdown, they've approached supermarkets to display their products there. Still, they had to prepare more creative market entry strategies to survive through the pandemic.
We're working on products that we could place in the supermarket, like ready-made cake mixes, and you have a pan, like a cupcake pan, and you place them and you can bake them yourself. So this is how we're starting to think, because what happens if now after Ramadan they go back to the same measures we started off with.
The night curfew has cost them 20% of their Ramadan sales, which is not bad at all given the circumstances. At least they're now prepared with a plan B if Egypt needs to take harsher measures against COVID-19. Adel Al-Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
There has been an increase in on-demand courier services in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, since COVID-19 was declared a pandemic. Operated by tech startups, the businesses are classified as essential services, delivering everything from food to medicine. As CGTN's Robert Nagila reports, one tech firm in particular, Glovo, is shaking up the market.
They are the unsung heroes of the COVID-19 crisis, ensuring the city never goes without supplies. Justin Paul is one of several hundred independent couriers partnering with on-demand courier service Glovo that buys, picks up and delivers products ordered through their mobile app.
We are trying as much as we can to provide this service while protecting ourselves and wherever customer we are delivering to.
Movement and physical distancing restrictions imposed by the government to control the spread of COVID-19 has seen a surge in demand for on-demand courier services as many Kenyans heed the government's call to stay home.
We are able to deliver during the curfew, but many restaurants are shut, which of course means there's a reduction of demand. This is counterbalanced by an increase in demand in groceries. We've seen around a 3 times increase in grocery orders over this period.
Glovo, a Spanish startup founded in Barcelona with a presence in Italy, has been in Kenya for just over a year. Experience of the pandemic in both European countries helped them get an early sense of the impact on their business quicker than their rivals.
There have been a number of changes that we've implemented to make sure that people are being kept safe. This ranges from contactless delivery, so products are picked up from the stores without any human interaction with the storekeepers or the restaurants. They're delivered by riders who have safety kits, and then they can be dropped off at a consumer's door without the consumer having to open the door and without any cash having to be exchanged.
That's because payments are made through mobile money apps to avoid the risk of spreading the virus through the use of cash. In 2019, the number of private courier firms in Kenya grew to over 1,000, with sector deliveries up 22% compared to the previous year. Other tech startups providing on-demand delivery services include Jumia and Sendi. Despite Glovo's success, they're not immune to the disruption in the financial markets caused by the pandemic. Increasing costs have meant they're yet to turn a profit.
The financial markets are obviously looking very uncertain, and we're now having to really be very careful and conserve our cash position to make sure that we can continue operating and turn a profit and if necessary not raise another round of funding.
In the meantime, the company says they'll continue to deliver on what they do best, on-demand courier service. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Tunisia has authorized the parents of children with autism to break the general lockdown rules. Experts say that parenting a child with special needs is challenging when they are forced to stay indoors. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi has more from Tunis.
Ryan is a 14-year-old child with autism. He's a very caring person with his family. The general lockdown in the country has forced him to stay at home. This decision has become a nightmare for many parents.
Children with autism cannot be forced to sit at home. It's the worst experience because they like to play in open spaces, to run and to have fun. Staying indoors between 4 walls during confinement is simply impossible.
Following an online campaign by the parents and civil society activists, thousands of children with autism were finally authorized by the Interior Ministry to leave their home at any time of the day.
My son and all the children with autism did not understand the new measures. He often asks for playing in the park during the night curfew. He is unconscious. That's why parents have looked for special authorization to take the kids out in the morning.
Yamina Haji is the director of a specialized school and the founder of Halim Center for Children with Autism. She argues that the general lockdown is having negative consequences on these children with special needs.
Unfortunately, children with autism are isolated in this period while they already suffer from communication and interaction problems. Our educational environment and healthcare service help the child and the parents. However, the lockdown has made us lose in 1 month the good behavioral results we achieved in 3 years.
Activists have launched an electronic platform to provide care to children with autism. The initiative is a cooperation project between civil society organizations in Tunisia, Algeria, Libya, Morocco, Mauritania, Oman, and Egypt. 150 experts are now giving daily interactive courses and delivering distance training through WhatsApp to secure a continued care for children with autism, house families cannot handle without the contribution of professionals during the lockdown period. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's a look at the headline. Nigeria's circus group adapts to stay alive despite lockdown.